If y'all want to know how I went from this to this, come watch this video and I'll show y'all how to do some mermaid braids. This is the braiding hair that I use for prep. I started by laying out my braiding hair on half of the stand and curly hair on the other half. As the process went on, it was more efficient to organize all my curly pieces on the rack and lay out 3 to 6 braiding pieces for 1 to 2 braids at a time. FaceTiming my iPad from my phone has been hugely immensely helpful. I don't know how else to say that, but like if you have the ability to do this, I highly recommend it. Another way you can do this is using a 3-way mirror. I've seen a lot of other people use that method. As for another piece of advice, don't stress over the parts in the back of your head. Like when you're finished your style, if you're doing like box braids, they're not really gonna see them. I mean, if they're crazy, then we'll see crazy. But if they're sort of there, sort of neat, if you're doing your best, then it'll be fine. I, for one, tend to do bigger boxes in the back of my head, and as I get to the top, they get smaller. And I only really stress about how straight I want it when it's like where I wear my part, you know? Or if like I'm at the top of my head where I need to start squaring things off, or this box is irregular. Because like I will say, I do have some boxes that are like a triangle, you know? Some of them they may have 4 sides, but they have acute angles somewhere. I say all this to say, don't stress about the back of your head. As long as you're doing your best, you're going to look presentable. I'm doing 3 braids for my bottom row. I normally do 4, but I wanted to try something a little different, you know, be a little crazy, you know, and do 3 instead of 4 like my usual. And I'm not putting any loose hair on these back row, and that's because in my research, according to my research, I learned that you don't really need hair on the back row because it's just gonna get tangled and matted very quickly, especially if you're using synthetic hair. There's just no need for it. You're not really gonna see it anyway, and by the end the style is very full. It doesn't really make a difference other than in maintenance down the line. So here I am parting as straight as I can. Sometimes you have to go back over and redo it again. Please don't drive yourself crazy, because I know I drive myself crazy trying to get perfect squares, even though look at how it's going great. Even though they're all not perfect, they're all not twins or identical. Literally, I'd have to be another person doing my own hair, like 2 people in the room type thing, to get the most perfect squares. And honestly, don't put yourself on a pedestal like that. You cannot see directly to the back of your head. Like, be easy on yourself. And that's something that I just had to tell myself and remind myself, like, hey, don't stress over this. It means nothing in the end, to be honest. And so now I'm just braiding. I'm showing you guys how I'm adding in the hair. I tried to clip the hair out of the way, but like it just wasn't working, and I just found it easier to like hold the hair in my mouth to give it tension and to pull it out the way. And it was just easier. Like, sure, I ate some gel and some hair, but like it's whatever, to be honest. I look good in the end. It's all worth it. And so I used 2 pieces. So I started off the knotless, braided down a few times, added my hair, and before I added that 3rd piece, that's where I put in my first loose piece of hair. And then I just braided down after adding the 3rd braiding hair, and I just braided all the way down until I was ready to add another loose piece of hair. And so most of the bottom half of my head has 3 loose pieces of hair with some loose hair on the ends. I added the curly hair to the smallest leg and then braided it in, but I also switched to a different method towards the end as I really got into the groove of doing all of the braids. And as I got closer to the top of my head, I started adding in more pieces because honestly, I was a little scared that the style wasn't gonna turn out right. Like it was looking real thin and I got real scared. After cutting the hair off the track, I combed out the hairs that were too short to braid with before using the braiding jam to glue the hairs together. Like you see how easy these are coming out? Then I let the comb create the clumps for the loose pieces that would be left out. The comb did a good job of making uniformly sized pieces. Sometimes they were a little too thin, but I just put like two together and it was to the thickness of my liking. And then I would just lay them on the rack. And here's a closer view of exactly what I was letting the comb do. So you see how I just ran it through like once and then I started picking out my clumps. That's about the size that I used. So now we are going to sit together as I braid this front piece in real time to show you guys what I was doing. So I'm just separating my legs into 3 pieces and I start my knotless box. Trying to make sure that they're all relatively even. This is the front of my head, so it's definitely going to be smaller because the hairs in the front are so much more fragile than the hair in the middle of my head. It's similar to the hair in the back of my head, how I would do it. So every piece of hair that I'm adding is relative to the size of hair that I'm starting off with. Like these pieces, they're gonna be a little smaller than probably what I just showed you, but it's all in relation to each other. And so I'm braiding and I'm adding in my braiding hair. And then when I get that third leg without the braiding hair, in my other hand, in my right hand, I'm going to then add my second braiding hair piece. And then I'm just gonna braid it in. And now I'm adding my first curly hair piece. Oh, nope, I'm adding more gel because that's what I feel like I needed. Yeah, I am adding my first curly hair piece. I knew what I was doing. You guys could trust me, I promise. And so yeah, we're just gonna braid. And then before I get too carried away, I'm gonna pull out the curly piece so it's secured. And I'm gonna put it in my mouth so it's out of the way. And then I'm gonna braid down a little bit more, and then I'm going to stop and add my third braiding piece. And then we're just gonna braid. I think I might speed this part up. No, I won't. I'm going to show you guys. I promise. I'm going to show you guys exactly how I braided it and how long it took me. Because I want to show you guys how I'm adding these curly pieces. And I'm adding another one. So in the front, I have like 5 pieces of hair, including the hair on the end. This was my second curly piece that I'm braiding and anchoring it in. And then we're gonna braid, making sure we don't lose track of where the curly piece is so we can pull it out. And we're gonna anchor it in our mouth again. This is what I'm talking about by like eating gel and hair, but it makes braiding easier when you're not accidentally braiding down your curly piece, because then you have to unbraid it to fish it out. Because like sometimes I could just slide it out, but other times I did have to redo an entire braid because I had braided down the curly piece so high up. And it sucked, but I mean, it is what it is. You just have to make sure the curly piece is out of the way so you don't braid it. And now I'm adding a third curly piece. And we're gonna braid. So I saw someone else do this style after I had finished, and they had feathered out the entire um curly hair pieces. Like they had used hair that wasn't on a track and they feathered out the end, so like they could just take braid in the middle of the hair strand, if that makes sense, and then fish it out. And I thought that was kind of efficient. So that's another way you could do it if you wanted to. That's kind of the method that I use to tie the ends. Not tie the ends, but to finish off the ends sometimes. But I didn't realize that, like, that's what I was doing, and I could have done that for my entire head if I had thought ahead. But that's why you're watching this video, so you guys can plan your moves accordingly. And so far I have 3 hair pieces. And I'm going to add another one as soon as I straighten out my hair. And here goes the 4th piece, kind of creating a loop at the top so I can anchor it into the braid. And we're gonna braid, braid, braid. Sometimes you bend at some weird angles to try to like keep the hair out the way, but you do what you gotta do, you know? Like, I tried to put it in my mouth, but like honestly that really wasn't working because it was messy. It was pulling and it was messing up my braid. So like, here we go, me bending really weirdly. I was looking in the camera to like show you guys like, hey, sometimes you end up like this, but it's worth it because you look good at the end. And so we're getting close to finishing the braid, and I'll show you guys exactly what I did. So we're braiding, 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 braiding down to the ends, and now we're ready to add it. So what I did was I took a piece of hair and I split it, and then I like flipped it around so that way it had long curly pieces on both ends of the braid, and then it was just so much easier to add it in and tie off it at the end. So it's not like there's a blunt piece sticking out, because the blunt pieces were shorter, so like they got braided down as well. And so I was left with 2 curly tails, and that is how I wished that I did my entire head instead of just the top. And then we're just gonna braid, 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 braid as much as we need to. We're gonna be braiding all the way down until we feel like we're good and we don't need to braid no more. Because like, you still want that curl at the end, but you also want to braid down far enough that it's secure. And then I'm just checking it to make sure that it's braided well and none of my loose pieces were braided in. I am making this video so you guys can learn from my mistakes, and I hope your hair turns out better than mine. And I mean, my hair turned out pretty dang great. To finish it off, I went back through each braid and I cut off the blunt ends of the curly pieces that were sticking out, and I braided it into 4 big braids and dipped it into water so that my braids could come out crinkly and blend in with the curly pieces. So it's been a couple of days now and I've experienced some shedding. I was not expecting this style to not shed, and I've already lost 1 curl, but I don't even know where it came from, so no one's gonna miss it if you're not missing it. For whatever type of hair you want to use for your curly pieces, just make sure they're all the same length. And I would not go any shorter than 20. I don't know why, but to me, jumping from 20 inches to 18 and 18 to 16, it was just too hard on my fingers to get into the groove again. So just go no shorter than 20 and then just cut it at the end. So I hope you guys learned something from this video, and I hope your hair turns out 10 times better than mine. whatever hair you decide to use for your curly pieces, I would recommend using all of the same length and then just cutting it at the end, because when I finished my 20 inches and then moved on to my 18 inches, that 2-inch difference was like, it felt like a huge adjustment in my fingers.
It's been a couple days now.
How I was
I've
braiding,
experienced
I don't know why, but it just felt like a
shedding,
big deal.
but
So
not
I think
much,
next time
you know,
I would
honestly
use all of the same.
I wasn't
length
expecting
of curly
this style
pieces.
not to shed,
And honestly,
and I have lost
I would not
one
go
entire
any shorter
curl
than
so
20
far,
inches.
but I mean, it's fine.
I don't know how
not
long you like your
noticeable.
hair. It just goes
but
back to making sure that your
it's
pieces
better
are
to just
secured
braid
and
it
your braids are
long
tight,
and then just
cut it at the end.
if you lose like
If
one
it's too
curl, no
long
one's
for
gonna
you,
know.
you're not even gonna
It's
know
so
where
much
it came
easier
from on your fingers.